At exactly 2 p.m., Nancy Pelosi made the fatal error that would end her 36-year. For 36 years, Nancy Pelosi humiliated every opponent who dared challenge her. She destroyed careers, ruined lives, crushed dreams. Today, she picked the wrong target. She called Senator John Kennedy a senile fool. The old Sinjin had waited his entire career for this moment. What happened next was the most beautiful political destruction in American history. The Senate Ethics Committee hearing room hummed with the particular tension that preceded political bloodshed. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana sat slumped at the witness table, apparently dozing, his reading glasses perched crooked on his nose. Papers lay scattered before him like fallen leaves held together with a worn rubber band. To any observer, he looked like exactly what Nancy Pelosi saw when she entered an easy target. She swept into the room at 2:15 p.m. with the confidence of someone who had never truly lost a fight. Her entourage buzzed around her like worker bees attending their queen, adjusting papers, whispering last-minute strategies. The former Speaker of the House took her designated seat with practiced authority, her eyes already dismissing the rumpled senator from Louisiana. "Wake up, Senator," Pelosi barked, her voice carrying the sharp edge of someone used to immediate obedience. "Though at your age, I understand the confusion between hearings and nap time." Kennedy's eyes opened slowly, like an alligator surfacing in a bayou. He smiled, and something in that smile made the temperature in the room drop perceptibly. "Well, good afternoon to you, too, Mrs. Pelosi." He drawled his Louisiana accent, thick as molasses. "Nice of you to join us. I was just having the most peculiar dream. DT about a public servant who got rich serving the public. Ain't that something? Course, that's just a dream. Nobody could really turn 36 years of public service into $100 million fortune. Could they?" Pelosi's eyes narrowed. This wasn't the confused old man she'd expected. But she'd destroyed sharper opponents than this Southern relic. She leaned into her microphone with practiced aggression. "Senator Kennedy, before we waste time with your folly nonsense, let me be clear. You're an embarrassment to this institution. A bumbling backwards fossil who—" "Bless your heart," Kennedy interrupted softly, the Southern phrase that could mean anything from genuine sympathy to complete contempt. In this case, the committee members had no doubt which it was. He fumbled with his folder, and it tumbled open, spilling papers across the table. "Oh my," he muttered, reaching for the scattered documents. "Butterfingers today. Getting old, I suppose, just like you said." But as the papers spread across the table, Pelosi noticed something that made her throat constrict. Each document that had accidentally fallen was positioned perfectly for the C-SPAN cameras to capture. Bank statements, trading records, and one particular document that made her blood run cold. A record from 2008 she thought had been buried forever. Kennedy took his time gathering the papers, letting the cameras drink in every detail. When he finally looked up, his eyes were sharp as surgical instruments. "But where are my manners?" He continued, holding up a single document. "Let's start with something simple. 2008. Remember 2008, Mrs. Pelosi? Most Americans remember it as the year their savings disappeared. Their homes were foreclosed. Their retirements vanished. But you remember it differently. Don't you?" He adjusted his crooked glasses, pretending to squint at the paper. "Says here, you got an allocation of Visa IPO shares. Special allocation not available to the public. Made yourself $100 in one day." He looked up, blinking innocently. "That's more than most Americans make in 2 years. All while you were writing credit card legislation. Legislation that helped Visa and hurt their competitors. Ain't that peculiar?" The color drained from Pelosi's face. Nobody had mentioned the Visa deal in 15 years. She'd thought those records were buried. The statute of limitations long passed. But Kennedy wasn't talking about criminal prosecution. He was talking about something worse. Public exposure. That's been thoroughly investigated." She stammered. "Has it now?" Kennedy asked mildly. "By whom? Your colleagues who were doing the same thing? The ethics committee you controlled?" "No, ma'am. It's never been investigated by the only court that matters. The American people. But don't worry, we're just getting started." He carefully placed the Visa document aside and reached for another folder. This one was thicker, newer, with a label that simply read, "Hall, your husband is quite the investor." Kennedy mused. "Better than Warren Buffett." Seems like we should all be so lucky to have his gift for timing. Or maybe luck ain't the right word. Pelosi gripped the edge of the table. Her knuckles white. The hunter had become the hunted. And she'd walked right into the trap. The senile old fool she'd mocked was neither senile nor a fool. He was a prosecutor who had waited 36 years for this moment, and he was just getting started. Senator Kennedy opened the folder marked Paul with the reverent care of a preacher opening a Bible. Though what lay inside was far from holy. He pulled out a chart that looked like something from a medical monitor. Peaks and valleys, dates and numbers, all telling a story of impossible success. Your husband Paul is a remarkable man. Kennedy began his draw, stretching the words like taffy. Started as a small-time real estate investor. Now he's worth, what is it? North of $100 million. The American dream right there. Pelosi had recovered some of her composure. My husband's success has nothing to do with your position. Kennedy finished helpfully. Of course not. Pure coincidence that his best trades happen right before major legislation. Take this one here. He pulled out a trading record. October 2002. Your husband's in the hospital. Terrible car accident. DUI, wasn't it? Most folks in the hospital are worried about finding the TV remote or when they can have solid food again. He paused, letting the committee room absorb the image. But not Paul. No, sir. At 3:47 a.m. While most patients are pressing the morphine button, Paul's pressing the buy button. $5 million of Nvidia stock from his hospital bed through the pain and the medication and whatnot. That's dedication to investing right there. Nervous laughter rippled through the gallery. Kennedy didn't smile. He pulled out another document. Now, here's the interesting part. The very next day, you announce the CHIPS Act is moving forward. Semiconductor stocks soar. That $5 million becomes $17 million faster than a crawfish backs away from a boiling pot. That's a 240% return in 6 months. Better than Bernie Madoff. And at least Paul's returns were real. My husband makes his own investment decisions. Does he now? Kennedy interrupted, pulling out what appeared to be a text message record. Because according to these phone records, you texted him. Let me get my readers on straight here. You texted him by NVDA now at 2:15 p.m. on October 4th. That was during your committee meeting. The closed committee meeting where semiconductor subsidies were discussed. 15 minutes later, Hall bought $5 million worth. Pelosi's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear. She waved him off, her face flushed with anger. Those are private communications, were private. Kennedy corrected, till they became evidence of insider trading. But let's not dwell on one lucky trade. Let's look at the pattern. He pulled out a thick stack of papers. Microsoft options bought 2 days before the Pentagon contract announcement. Tesla calls purchased the morning before electric vehicle subsidies were revealed. Google shares acquired right before the antitrust investigation was dropped. Alphabet soup of perfect timing. He looked up at Pelosi with false wonder. In Louisiana, we got a saying, even a blind squirrel finds a nut sometimes. But Paul, he finds nothing but nuts. It's like he's got himself a seeing eye dog. And that dog's name is Nancy. The committee room was dead silent now. Even Pelosi's allies looked uncomfortable. The evidence was overwhelming, the pattern undeniable. But here's my favorite. Kennedy continued, warming to his theme. March 2020. The pandemic's starting. Most Americans are scared, confused, don't know what's coming. But Paul sells all his hospitality stocks on February 24th. Every hotel, every restaurant, every entertainment stock gone. Same day he buys Amazon, Zoom, Netflix, Pelation 2 weeks before the lockdowns. He leaned back, studying Pelosi like a specimen. Now I'm just a simple country lawyer. But that timing seems supernatural. Unless, of course, someone was attending classified briefings about pandemic response. Someone who knew lockdowns were coming. Someone who could tell their husband exactly what to buy and what to sell. That's preposterous, is it? Kennedy pulled out one final document from the Paul folder. This is Paul's trading account history. 40 years of records. Want to know something fascinating? For the first 20 years, he was an average investor. Some wins, some losses, about market rate returns. But starting in 1987, the exact year you entered Congress, his success rate jumps to 89%. And starting in 2007, when you became Speaker, it hits 94%. He removed his crooked glasses, cleaning them slowly, In Louisiana, we hunt alligators. Been doing it for generations. And you know what? We learned gators are predictable. They hunt the same spot. Same times. Same way. Once you know their pattern, catching them is easy. He put his glasses back on, looking directly at Pelosi. You and Paul have been hunting the same spot for 36 years. The spot where public service meets private profit. And ma'am, I got to tell you, the American people are tired of being your prey. Kennedy closed the Paul folder with quiet finality. But his hand was already reaching for the next one. This one had a small photo clipped to it. An ice cream container. Speaking of the pandemic, he said softly, let's talk about your freezer. You remember that freezer, don't you? The one that cost more than most Americans make in a year. Kennedy reached into a small cooler beside his chair that no one had noticed before. He pulled out a pint of ice cream. Jenny's Splendid Ice Cream's the same $13 per pint brand that had made Pelosi infamous. The container sweated condensation in the warm committee room as he set it carefully on the table. Brought you a snack, he said pleasantly. No, you're partial to this flavor. Brambleberry crisp, I believe. $13 a pint. That's about what a minimum wage worker makes in an hour before taxes. But you probably didn't know that. Pelosi's eyes fixed on the ice cream with the weariness of someone who sensed a trap but couldn't see its shape. Is this supposed to be some kind of joke? No joke. Ma'am, see, in April 2020, while Americans were losing their jobs, their homes, their minds from lockdown, you did something special. You gave America a tour of your kitchen. Showed off your freezer. Not just any freezer. A $24 Sub-Zero model. You had two of them. Actually, side by side, like a monument to excess. Kennedy pulled out a tablet and played the infamous video. There was Pelosi cheerfully showing off her ice cream collection while discussing the economic hardship Americans were facing. The contradiction was stark. Even without commentary, we all have to make sacrifices. Kennedy quoted, "That's what you said while showing off ice cream that costs more per pint than a family of 4 spends on a whole meal." Marie Antoinette would have blushed at the optics. He picked up the ice cream container, turning it in his hands. But you know what really got me curious? Why were you so proud of that ice cream? So I did some digging. Turns out Jenny's Splendid Ice Cream's got a PPP loan of $2.4 million. Same week, you showed off their product on national TV. Their sales went up 300%. Coincidence? That's ridiculous. But wait, there's more. As they say on TV. Kennedy popped open the ice cream container. But instead of ice cream, it was packed with rolled documents. I took the liberty of replacing the ice cream with something else that's been on ice for too long. These are unemployment claims from your district. Been sitting in your office unprocessed. Some for over 2 years. He pulled out the papers one by one, reading names and dates. Maria Gonzalez lost her job March 2020. Still waiting for help. Chen Wu Family Restaurant closed. Applied for assistance April 2020. Never got a response. Michael O'Brien, construction worker injured on the job. Can't get his claims processed. Each name landed like a hammer blow. The documents kept coming, filling the table. You were eating $13 ice cream while Maria Gonzalez was selling her card to buy food for her kids. You were showing off freezers that cost more than most people's cars while Chen Wu was losing the restaurant his grandfather started. That's not leadership, Mrs. Pelosi. That's modern aristocracy. Pelosi's face had gone from red to pale. Those claims are processed by state agencies, which you oversee through federal funding. Kennedy countered. But let's talk about your district since we're on the subject. You've represented San Francisco for 36 years. That's a long time. Time enough to make a real difference. So, let's see what difference you made. He pulled out 2 photographs, laying them side by side on the table. This is your district in 1987 when you started. Thriving businesses, families, walking the streets, one of America's jewels. This is your district today. The second photo was shocking. Tent cities, boarded storefronts, needles on the sidewalk, human waste in the gutters. It looked like a war zone. 36 years of your leadership. Kennedy said quietly, if this was a business, you'd have been fired 30 years ago. But it's not a business. Is it? It's a feudal kingdom, and you're the lord of the manor living high, while your serfs suffer in squalor. He pulled out more statistics. Homelessness up 300%. Crime up 400%. But here's the interesting part. Property values in your neighborhood are up 5.000%. Your particular block gets extra police protection, private security, street cleaning. Funny how that works. The problems in San Francisco are complex. Complex. Kennedy's voice hardened for the first time. What's complex about human beings defecating in the streets? What's complex about children stepping over needles to get to school? What's complex about businesses fleeing like rats from a sinking ship? The only thing complex here is how you've managed to stay in power while presiding over this disaster. He held up another document. Federal funds allocated to San Francisco for homeless services. $3.22 billion over the last decade. Actual reduction in homelessness. 0. Where'd that money go, Mrs. Pelosi? Because it sure didn't go to the folks living in tents outside your office. The ice cream container sat between them, its melting contents of human misery spreading across the table. Kennedy pushed it toward her. In Louisiana, we have a saying, you can't have your cake and eat it, too. But you've been having your ice cream and eating it for 36 years while the people you claim to serve can't afford milk. That's not public service. That's public theft. He was already reaching for the next folder. This one was marked simply 920. Speaking of the pandemic, he said, let's discuss your salon visit. You remember that day, don't you? The day the rules you demanded for everyone else suddenly didn't apply to you. September 2010 had been a hard month for San Francisco. Businesses shuttered, families isolated, dreams dying behind locked doors. But not everyone was suffering equally, as Senator Kennedy was about to demonstrate. He pulled out a tablet and positioned it so the committee could see the screen. September 2, 2020, Labor Day week. Your city's under strict lockdown. Salons have been closed for months. Women are cutting their own hair in bathroom mirrors. Men looking like cavemen. But not you. The security footage began to play. There was Nancy Pelosi walking through a closed salon. Her mask around her neck like a fashion accessory rather than protection. E-salon on Union Street. Kennedy narrated. Supposed to be closed by your own orders. But there you are getting your hair done while the owner faces bankruptcy. When this came out, you said you were set up. That the salon owner tricked you. Let's explore that. Pelosi shifted uncomfortably. This was old news, she thought, already litigated in the press. But Kennedy was pulling out new documents. What you didn't know, he continued, was that the salon owner, Erica Keoghs, had more than just security footage. She had audio. You see, in California, security cameras in businesses can legally record audio. And Ms. Keoghs, facing bankruptcy from your lockdown orders, had recently upgraded her system. He pressed play on a new file. Pelosi's voice filled the committee room, clear and unmistakable. Of course, I know salons are supposed to be closed. I wrote the damn guidelines. But I have a national TV appearance tomorrow. What do you expect me to do? Go on CNN looking like a homeless person? The recording continued, the stylist's nervous voice. But if someone sees, nobody's going to see. And if they do, I'll handle it. The rules are for ordinary people, not for people who make the rules. Now, fix this mess before I look like Bernie Sanders. The committee room was silent except for the sound of rapid typing from reporters. This was new. This was devastating. Kennedy paused the recording. The rules are for ordinary people, not for people who make the rules. That's quite a philosophy of governance. Mrs. Pelosi, very monarchical. King Louis XVI would approve. That recording was obtained illegally. Actually, it wasn't. Kennedy corrected, producing legal documents. California Penal Code 632 permits recording in business establishments where privacy isn't reasonably expected. But let's continue because it gets worse. He played more audio. Pelosi's voice again. If that woman says anything to the press, I'll destroy her business. I'll make sure she never gets a license in California again. I have that power. And you used that power, didn't you? Kennedy asked, pulling out more documents. Ms. Keoghs was forced to close her salon permanently. Death threats from your supporters. Protests at her home. She had to leave California. Leave her home of 30 years. All because she revealed that Nancy Pelosi thinks the rules don't apply to her. He produced a written statement from Keoghs. She wanted to be here today. But she's afraid. Afraid of you. Afraid of what you might do to what's left of her life. That's the climate you create. Mrs. Pelosi. Fear. Intimidation. One set of rules for you. Another for everyone else. But let's talk about the pattern here. Kennedy continued warming to his theme. Because the salon wasn't an isolated incident. Throughout the lockdowns, you demanded for others. You lived freely. He pulled out a series of photographs. November 2020. Dinner at the French Laundry. Indoor dining while telling others to stay home. December 2020. Holiday party at your house while families were forced to spend Christmas alone. January 2021. Trip to Florida while telling Californians not to travel. Each photo was death-stamped, location tagged, undeniable. You imprisoned others while living free, Kennedy said, his voice carrying the weight of genuine anger. Now you destroyed businesses while protecting your own investments. You separated families while gathering with yours. That's not leadership, that's tyranny. He pulled out one final document from the salon folder. But here's the part that really gets me. While Ms. Keogh's was being destroyed for exposing your hypocrisy while she was getting death threats and losing her life's work, you were making money. Your husband sold his salon industry stocks in September 2020, right before you extended the lockdowns. Made a $1.2 million profit, betting against the very businesses you were destroying. The pattern was clear, undeniable, devastating. Public position for private profit. Rules for thee, but not for me. The aristocracy of pull laid bare. In Louisiana, Kennedy said softly, we have a type of parasitic plant called daughter. It wraps around healthy plants, sucking out their nutrients, eventually killing the host. But it always stays green itself. Always thriving, even as everything around it dies. He looked directly at Pelosi. You've been the daughter vine on San Francisco for 36 years. Staying green while everything around you withers. Well, ma'am, I think it's time to do some pruning. His hand moved to another folder. This one had a date on it. 16/21. Now, let's talk about January 6th. He said, a day of chaos, fear, and death, but also apparently a day of opportunity. At least for those who knew what was coming. Senator Kennedy opened the folder marked 16/21 with unusual solemnity. The events of that day had scarred the nation. And even in this charged atmosphere, a hush fell over the committee room. January 6, 2021, he began, a dark day for our democracy. We all remember where we were, what we felt, but some folks, it seems, were more prepared than others. He pulled out a security timeline, each entry stamped and verified. As Speaker of the House, you were responsible for Capitol security. That's not partisan opinion. That's constitutional fact. The Capitol Police reported to you. So, let's examine your decisions leading up to that day. The timeline was damning. January 3rd Road. Capitol Police Chief requests additional officers denied. January 4th. Request for National Guard support. Denied. January 5th Intelligence briefing warns of potential violence. No action taken. Security decisions are complex. Pelosi began. Are they? Kennedy interrupted. Because it seems like every decision you made weakened security. Almost like you wanted something to happen. But that would be unthinkable. Wouldn't it? Unless he pulled out a document that made several committee members lean forward. This is a filming permit for a documentary crew filed January 4th. 2 days before the events. The crew led by your daughter Alexandra Pelosi. The implications hung in the air like smoke. Now, I'm not a Hollywood fellow. Kennedy continued. But it seems mighty peculiar to bring a documentary crew to what should have been a routine certification. Unless you knew it wouldn't be routine. Unless you knew something dramatic was about to happen. He pulled out more documents. Here's what's really interesting. The permit specifies full access throughout the day, including secure areas. That permit was approved by the Speaker's office by you. 2 days before anyone supposedly knew there would be anything worth filming. My daughter is a professional filmmaker who just happened to be making a documentary about you on the one day in your entire career when the Capitol was breached. That's either supernatural luck or supernatural knowledge. Which was it? Kennedy pulled out printouts of emails. Timestamps clearly visible. But here's where it gets really interesting. At 2:15 p.m., while the Capitol was still under siege, while officers were still fighting for their lives, while blood was still being spilled, your office sent out this fundraising email. He read from the printout. Today's dark events show why we need your support more than ever. Democracy itself is under attack. Donate now to defend our values. Sent while people were still hiding in fear. While Ashley Babbitt's body was still warm. While Officer Sicknick was still fighting for his life. The committee room was dead silent. Even hardened political observers looked shocked. That email raised $47 million in 6 hours. Kennedy continued, the single most successful fundraising effort in your career. Built on blood and chaos. In Louisiana, we wait for the bodies to cool before we pass the collection plate. But you were monetizing tragedy in real time. He pulled out another document. But let's talk about preparation. This is your speech from that evening. Powerful words about democracy under attack. About rising from the ashes. Beautiful rhetoric. Just one problem. The metadata shows it was written on January 5th. The day before. You pre-wrote your response to a crisis that hadn't happened yet. Speeches are often prepared in advance for crises that haven't occurred. Do you have a speech ready for alien invasion? 2. Or just for events you know are coming? Kennedy's voice had lost all its folksy charm now. This was a prosecutor closing in for the kill. But here's the truly damning part. He said, pulling out a thick report. This is the after-action analysis of security failures. Every recommendation the Capitol Police made you had rejected. Every warning they gave you had ignored. Every resource they requested, you had denied. It's almost like you wanted minimal security. Like you wanted chaos. He looked directly at her. And then you used that chaos. Used it to raise money. Used it to destroy political opponents. Used it to create a committee where you handpicked members. Destroyed evidence protocols. And turned a tragedy into a political weapon. You even destroyed the security tapes. He continued pulling out more documents. The January 6th committee, which you controlled, destroyed evidence after their work. Destroyed it. In any other investigation, that would be obstruction of justice. But you made the rules. So you exempted yourself. He closed the folder slowly. 4 people died that day. Many more were injured. Lives were destroyed. And you profited from every minute of it. Pre-positioned your daughter to film it. Pre-wrote your speeches. Pre-planned your fundraising. That's not leadership responding to crisis. That's vultures circling before the animal is even dead. Kennedy leaned back, his disgust evident. In Louisiana, we've got hurricanes. Real disasters that we can't prevent. Only prepare for. But we don't celebrate them. We don't profit from them. We sure as hell don't cause them. But you saw a storm coming. And instead of battening down the hatches, you opened all the windows. He was reaching for the final folder. Now, this one was thicker than all the others with a simple label. Family. We've talked about your husband. Your district. Your hypocrisy. Your exploitation of tragedy. Kennedy said, now, let's talk about the family business. Because public service in the Pelosi family pays very, very well. Kennedy unfolded what looked like a massive piece of butcher paper, spreading it across the table. As it unfurled, committee members craned their necks to see what resembled a complex organizational chart. The kind the FBI might use to map organized crime families. Had to use butcher paper for this. Kennedy explained, regular paper wasn't big enough to map all the connections. This here is the Pelosi family tree. But it's not like any family tree you'd hang in your living room. This one shows how public service became private profit for every branch. The chart was staggering in its complexity. Lines connected names to companies. Companies to government contracts. Contracts back to family members. It looked like a spider web woven by a very greedy spider. Let's start with the children, Kennedy said, pointing to various branches. Every single one of your children is mysteriously wealthy. Now, success can run in families. Sure, but this kind of success. This kind that always involves government contracts. Regulatory decisions. Insider information. That's not genetics. That's nepotism with a capital N. He pointed to specific entries. Christine Pelosi, your daughter, runs a consulting firm that specializes in government relations. Her clients mysteriously win federal contracts at a 78% rate. The average rate for other firms. 12%. She must write one hell of a proposal. My children's success is built on your position. Kennedy finished. Paul Jr., your son, real estate investor, bought properties in San Francisco's Tenderloin district for pennies on the dollar in 2009. 2 months later, federal redevelopment funds were announced for that exact area. His properties increased in value by 400% overnight. Lucky timing. Or did someone know where the federal money was going? He moved to another section of the chart. Alexandra, the filmmaker daughter, the one with the convenient documentary crew on January 6th. Her production company has received $2.7 million in grants from the National Endowment for the Arts. Grants you helped secure through appropriations. She makes films about you funded by taxpayers that polish your image. That's not art. That's propaganda paid for by the people you're propagandizing. The connections went on and on. Each family member tied to government money. Each success story traceable back to NY's position. But let's talk about the extended family. Kennedy continued. Your nephew Gavin Newsom, governor of California, you helped launch his career and he's returned the favor. State contracts to Pelosi-connected firms. Regulatory decisions that benefit Pelosi investments. It's like a mutual enrichment society. He pulled out specific documents. 2018 California awards a $2.8 billion high-speed rail contract. The winning consortium includes 3 firms with Pelosi family connections. 2020s. State COVID response contracts worth $800 million. Pelosi-connected firms get $300 million of it. 2022 green energy initiatives worth $1.2 billion. Guess whose relatives are suddenly in the green energy business? But here's my favorite part. Kennedy said, pointing to a section of the chart marked financial services. Your husband Paul's investment firm. It's not really an investment firm. Is it? It has no clients except your family. It produces no research. Offers no services. Has no employees except Paul. It's just a vehicle for managing the money you've accumulated through insider trading and influence peddling. He pulled out tax documents. But it allows you to claim business expenses. Trips to investigate investment opportunities that coincidentally coincide with luxury vacations. Meals with potential clients who happen to be family friends. Home offices. Car leases. Even some of that ice cream is client entertainment. The IRS might be interested in this creative accounting. Kennedy stood up, gesturing at the entire chart. In Louisiana, we know about family businesses. Lots of folks passed down shrimp boats. Restaurants. Farms. Good, honest work built over generations. But this isn't a family business. This is a family syndicate. The Gambinos with government contracts instead of garbage trucks. He pulled out one final document from the family folder. This is an analysis of wealth accumulation for your family members over the past 30 years. Every single one has gotten rich. Not comfortable. Not successful. Rich. Multi-millionaire rich. All while you were in positions to influence policy. Direct funds. Make decisions that benefited them. The chart showed the wealth curves. All hockey sticks shooting upward. All correlating with NY's rise to power. You know what this reminds me of? Kennedy asked, returning to his seat. Medieval times. Lords and ladies living in castles while peasants worked the fields. The lord's family all got titles. Lands. Wealth. Not because they earned it, but because they were born into the right family. We fought a revolution to end that system. But you brought it back. Just dressed it up in modern clothes. He began carefully folding the massive chart. The founding fathers were afraid of exactly this. Public service becoming a path to family enrichment. Democracy becoming aristocracy. They'd be spinning in their graves fast enough to power the Capitol building. Kennedy's hands rested on one final item. Not a folder this time, but a gavel. In Louisiana, we got a saying. Pigs get fat. Hogs get slaughtered. Your family didn't just get fat on public money. You became hogs. 3 generations of hogs feeding at the public trough. Well, ma'am, I think it's time for the slaughter. He lifted the gavel, examining it thoughtfully. This is supposed to represent justice. Order. Fair dealing. Fair. You've held one like it for years. But you used it to enrich yourself and your family while the people you swore to serve got poorer and more desperate. He set the gavel down with a decisive bang that echoed through the chamber. Time's up, Mrs. Pelosi. The aristocracy you built is about to fall. And unlike the French Revolution, we're going to do it legally. Properly with full due process because that's how Americans handle tyrants. We expose them, we vote them out, and we prosecute them for their crimes. The committee room was utterly silent. Pelosi sat frozen, her face a mask of shock and rage. 36 years of careful construction. 3 generations of wealth accumulation. A political dynasty built on public service and private profit. All of it laid bare by an old senator from Louisiana with a gift for following the money. Mr. Chairman, Kennedy said formally. I move to refer all evidence presented today to the Department of Justice for criminal investigation. to the SEC for securities fraud investigation, and to the House Ethics Committee for immediate action. The people of San Francisco, the people of California, and the people of America deserve better than a hereditary aristocracy dressed up as democracy. The motion would pass. The investigations would begin. The Pelosi dynasty, 3 generations in the making, had taken only one afternoon to demolish. And somewhere in Louisiana, folks would remember that sometimes the good guys do win if they're patient enough and smart enough to follow the money all the way to the truth. The committee room had taken on the quality of a held breath. Nancy Pelosi, who had entered like a queen 3 hours ago, now sat diminished, her hands gripping the table's edge as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Senator Kennedy began gathering his documents with the methodical care of a man who knew the value of evidence properly preserved. "You know, Mrs. Pelosi," Kennedy said, his drawl returning as the tension began to ease, "I've been in politics a long time. Seen a lot of folks mistake public service for personal enrichment. But I've never seen anyone turn it into a 3-generation family industry quite like you have." Pelosi finally found her voice, though it came out higher and more strained than anyone had ever heard it. "This is a witch hunt. A partisan attack. You've taken things out of context. Misconstrued facts." "Ma'am," Kennedy interrupted gently, "witch hunts are based on fantasy and fear. This here is based on your bank records, your emails, your own words caught on tape. If that's a witch hunt, then you must be a witch because the evidence is overwhelming." He pulled out one final document he'd kept in reserve. "Speaking of your own words, I've got one more recording. This one's from a fundraiser in 2019. Private event. Big donors only. You probably thought you were among friends. Safe to speak freely." He pressed play on his tablet. Pelosi's voice filled the room, confident and contemptuous. "The beauty of our system is that the voters are too stupid to understand how it really works. They think they're electing representatives. What they're really doing is electing a ruling class. And once you're in the ruling class, the money flows like water. You just have to be smart enough to catch it without getting caught." The recording continued. "My family will be politically and financially secure for generations. That's what power is for. To protect and enrich your own. The plebeians can have their circuses. We'll take the bread." The committee room erupted. Even Pelosi's allies couldn't hide their shock. She had just called her constituents stupid plebeians, admitted to using power for family enrichment, and revealed an aristocratic contempt that validated everything Kennedy had exposed. That was a private conversation." Pelosi stammered. "Yes, it was." Kennedy agreed. "Your true thoughts when you thought no one was listening. And ma'am, I've got to tell you, they're even uglier than I imagined. Plebeians, really? Did you think you were Caesar's wife?" He stood slowly, his age showing in the careful movement, but his spirit undimmed. "In Louisiana, we've got all kinds of critters in the swamp. Gators, snakes, nutria, but the most dangerous creature isn't any of those. It's the parasite, too small to see, but it gets in the water supply, makes folks sick, kills them slowly from the inside. You can fight a gator. You can't fight what you can't see." He looked directly at Pelosi. "You've been a parasite on San Francisco for 36 years. Invisible to most folks, sucking the life out of that city while making yourself fat and happy. Well, today we put you under the microscope, and what we saw was ugly." Pelosi tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't support her. "I demand to leave. This hearing is over. I have rights." "You do have rights," Kennedy agreed. "The right to remain silent might be a good one to exercise about now because everything you've said today is on the record. Under oath. And some of it sounds an awful lot like confession." He turned to Chairman Jim Jordan. "Mr. Chairman, I believe we have more than enough evidence to proceed with formal investigations. I suggest we start with criminal referrals for insider trading, tax fraud, misuse of public funds, and conspiracy to defraud the United States. The SEC and IRS will want to see these documents immediately." Jordan nodded, barely containing his satisfaction. "The motion is approved. All evidence will be forwarded to the appropriate authorities." "You can't do this," Pelosi whispered, but there was no force behind it. She knew they could. They just had. Kennedy gathered the last of his papers, then paused. "One more thing, Mrs. Pelosi. That salon owner, Erica Kise, the one you destroyed for exposing your hypocrisy. I spoke to her last week. She wanted me to give you a message." He pulled out a small card and read, "I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to let bitterness poison my life the way greed poisoned yours. I've rebuilt my life in Texas, where freedom still means something. I hope someday you'll understand what you've lost." He set the card on the table in front of Pelosi. "That's grace, ma'am, more than you showed her. More than you've shown anyone. But it's never too late to change. Even parasites can stop feeding on others if they choose to." The hearing was ending. Members were gathering their things. Reporters rushing to file stories. But Kennedy had one final word. "Oh, and Mrs. Pelosi. You might want to call your husband. Tell him to stop trading. The SEC will be freezing your accounts by close of business today. Wouldn't want him to rack up any more violations while they're counting the ones you've already got." He walked toward the exit, his slight limp more pronounced after sitting so long. At the door, he turned back one last time. "You know what the difference is between you and me? I came to Washington to serve Louisiana. You came to serve yourself. I'll go home someday with nothing but my pension and my pride. You'll go home with millions of dollars and a destroyed city as your legacy. I know which one I'd rather have." The door closed behind him with a quiet click that somehow sounded like finality. Nancy Pelosi sat alone at the table, surrounded by the debris of her exposed corruption. The woman who had wielded the speaker's gavel like a scepter now looked small, old, and very much like what she was. A public servant who had forgotten the public, and remembered only the service to herself. The committee room slowly emptied until only the C-SPAN cameras remained, their red lights still blinking, recording the image of a political dynasty in ruins. Outside, Senator Kennedy walked slowly toward his office aide by his side. "You think she'll actually face consequences?" the aide asked. Kennedy considered the question. "In Louisiana, we've got a saying. Every gator thinks he's king of the bayou till he meets a bigger gator. She's been the biggest gator in her pond for a long time. But the law is a bigger gator still. And it's hungry." He paused at his office door. "Besides, it's not about her anymore. It's about the next politician who thinks about turning public service into private profit. Maybe they'll remember what happened here today and choose differently. That's all we can hope for. That exposure leads to change. That sunlight really does disinfect." His aide held the door open. "What now?" Senator Kennedy smiled, the first genuine smile he'd shown all day. Now we get back to actual work. Serving the people who sent us here. Novel concept, I know, but it just might catch on." As the door closed behind him, the Capitol building stood silent in the afternoon sun, witness to another chapter in the endless struggle between those who would serve and those who would rule. Today, just for today, the servants had won. And somewhere in San Francisco, in a city plagued by decades of neglect and corruption, people were watching the news and wondering if maybe, just maybe, change was finally coming. The gavel had fallen, the verdict was in, and Nancy Pelosi's reign was over. 6 months after the hearing that changed everything, Nancy Pelosi announced she would not seek re-election. The statement was brief, citing family considerations and a desire to explore new opportunities. No one was fooled. The investigations had begun. The indictments were coming and the Pelosi dynasty was crumbling. Paul Pelosi's trades were under SEC investigation. The IRS was auditing 30 years of returns. The House Ethics Committee, free from her control for the first time in decades, was uncovering violation after violation. Family members were lawyering up, distancing themselves, cutting deals. In San Francisco, a new generation of leaders was emerging. Leaders who actually lived in the communities they represented, who rode public transit, who sent their kids to public schools. The city wasn't healed. That would take years. But for the first time in decades, there was hope. Erica Kios, the salon owner, had opened a new shop in Texas. Business was booming. She kept a photo from the hearing on her wall. Not of Pelosi's humiliation, but of Senator Kennedy reading her forgiveness letter. Grace, she had learned, was the best revenge. And in Louisiana, Senator John Kennedy continued his work, a little older, a little more tired, but satisfied in the way of someone who had done a hard job well. He still talked slow, still played the country lawyer, still fumbled with his papers. But nobody underestimated him anymore, because sometimes in the swamp of Washington politics, it takes a man who knows gators to catch one. And John Kennedy, he just caught the biggest gator of them all. The only question now was whether anyone would learn from it or whether new gators would simply take the old one's place. Time would tell. Time always did. But for one shining moment in one committee room, truth had prevailed over power. Service had triumphed over greed. And the people had won against those who would rule them. It was enough for now. It was enough.